The struggles of a woman, where do I begin? It may include the following: motherhood, parenting our parents, kicking ass in your business or career, dealing with your mental health, high anxiety, ADHD, or another neurodivergency, and being in a marriage or partnership. It's a lot, but how come it feels like no one talks about it? Like we as women need to be this superhero and we could do it all. Well, guess what? Me and my former client, who is now my neighbor, literally lives a mile away from me, Danielle Kitsis, a 9-figure entrepreneur, mother of 3, and spiritual mentor, talk about it all. We talk about real life stories and struggles that we're going through right now. We even ask each other for advice in this podcast because this is a real talk podcast. And before we get deep, because you probably want to know what's happening in my life, do me and my team a favor. Hit that follow button on Apple, Spotify, or whatever streaming platform you are using to listen to this podcast, the WOC and Allies Business and Career Real Talk podcast. My team and I created this podcast for accessible education and want more women of color and allies to have access to this. And how podcast platforms measure a successful podcast is seeing how many people hit that follow button. So just pause this episode, hit the follow button, and come right back on. All right, let's drop the beat.
Hey, I'm Elaine Lucartas. I'm a business and career coach for women of color and allies. LA Weekly awarded me the #1 thought leader, and Apple News named me one of the top 5 business coaches. Done doing the most as a woman of color or ally, and you want to create your own definition of success and happiness? Well, grab your coffee, tea, or boba, and let's do some business and career real talk. Legacy leaders, I am recording this podcast episode a little late at 9 p.m. because we have a mother of 3, a multi-passionate entrepreneur who's had 9-figure businesses. And how long have you been married now, Danielle? I know you just celebrated.
We just celebrated 13 years.
13 years of marriage, honoring herself, doing me time. My former client for, I believe, a year or 2. And now my new neighbor, by the way, because I moved to her neighborhood, literally a mile away.
Yep.
I'm excited to have Danielle Kitsis in here. And I didn't even know this. I was like joking around in a very fun manner of like, you are like Miss America. I didn't realize you were all the things: Indigenous, Jewish, Catholic, Costa Rican, European. It's amazing. So we wanted to focus on being real, having real talk on motherhood, being a multi-passionate entrepreneur, me time, being a caregiver to our parents.
Yeah.
Danielle, what else? Oh, hello. I forgot. Danielle's also medical intuitive, energy healer, intuitive. If it wasn't for Danielle, I wouldn't have gotten Reiki certified with her own mentor, Becky Hernandez. So Danielle, you helped open that portal. And the reason why I got into Reiki and spirituality is because both my grandmothers were starting to go transition. So thank you. Danielle, what else do you want to brag about yourself?
Oh, man. And we were just talking about this, that it was because of you and obviously therapy. I love therapy. And having a good partner that I was able to really step into being able to celebrate myself and acknowledge my wins and my accomplishments. I think you covered it.
Yeah, it's, I was texting a friend that lives close to us since we are neighbors. I think we're literally a mile away from each other. We are not recording next to each other, but we are technically a mile away from each other.
But we could.
Yes, a future episode. And one of my friends who I box would do Muay Thai with, she didn't like bragging that she's a nurse and a respiratory therapist to the rest of the gym. I was like, you should brag about, I don't like bragging. I was like, you know what? Men brag all the fucking time. Like, this is not bragging. You're just stating facts. Like, you are saving lives. Because she comes in, she looks really tired because she was working a long 12-hour shift. And I was like, oh my God, what happened? No, I just worked. I'm like, yeah, and I would just be that cheerleader. She's saving lives, everybody. But anyways, Danielle, so you are a multi-passionate entrepreneur, owning several rental properties, co-owning an escrow company for 15 years, and overseeing 9-figure deposits, while at the same time also being a spiritual mentor, Reiki, energy healing, and a mother of 3, a loving daughter taking care of your mom, and married for 13 years. How did you get here? How'd you survive?
I mean, I think that is still not yet clear if I've survived, but no, I have. I mean, I'm here.
You're thriving. Sorry, not just surviving, you're thriving.
Well, I really am. I'm at a place of being really happy and content where things are, but I think it's life. It's where life takes you and where you allow it to take you. That's how I've gotten here. I think every aspect of where I'm at and what I am doing now is attributed to some passion I had when I was younger. I always loved real estate and I loved architecture and interior design.
And you have such a beautiful home that I got to do a Reiki session with you. Beautiful.
And we're in that room, right? So that was really helpful, was having a dad who worked in the real estate industry. That's kind of luck, right? What you're born into. But him finally agreeing to have me work with him, because it was for years no. And then just in the journey with spirituality and healing. And that was a part of my childhood, and through my mom and hearing stories about our family. Yeah, it's just been all these different pieces of my past finally emerging to a place where I could accept them as passions and things I wanted to do and not feel like I had to force myself to just pick one, right? That there's a way to do things against the grain that actually works better for me and better for my life and better for my family.
It makes sense. I mean, we worked together for a year, and when I was preparing for this interview, I'm like, I texted Danielle before. I was like, I didn't realize, I mean, I knew you were amazing, but I didn't even know how much more amazing you are. And I love that you not just acknowledged it, but appreciated my compliment to you. And it makes sense why you are multi-passionate, is because you are multi-dimensional, like from your upbringing. So I know you are a survivor of intergenerational trauma. I have a lot of listeners, including my own clients, who are beautifully neurodivergent, right? Having whether anxiety, PTSD, and depression. What advice would you have for those that are listening? Or what do you wish someone told you when you were like really in the thick of it?
So I think I can say what I didn't like being told, which was, and I think this is something people of color and children of immigrants can understand, is don't tell the doctors or don't ask those questions because it'll be on your paper. It'll be on your medical history. And, you know, there's so many barriers we were already up against. To make yourself extra different was not seen as, I think I would have appreciated someone just saying, it's okay to be different. And it took years. And like you mentioned, right, the labels, I recently, just last summer, finally got a full psychological, assessment. And it was the most liberating thing I could have done for myself, right? Between talking to therapists and my partner and having my little village, getting to know that you're not crazy, getting to know, oh, there is something here. And you don't have to identify with the label and make it your whole identity. At the same time, you now have access to more tools and resources that can help you navigate life within these different subsets or bubbles that you find yourself in. So I would say talking to people is the best thing, acknowledging that you are who you are and there's nothing wrong with you. And even, especially for neurodivergent folks, the next step, that there's nothing to fix, right? Like, you are who you are. And maybe there are things that we can bring into our lives to help us adapt better in a world that wasn't built for our brains or our experiences, in the case of CPTSD, right? Or PTSD.
And what is that, by the way, just in case people don't know?
So that's complex PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the labels that I was given, but it gives so much clarity of, oh, this isn't what someone else has experienced. So this makes sense why I may respond or react in a certain way. So being able and being willing to put your trust and faith in a medical institution that we hear so much about, right? Or in the lives of professionals that really do have your best interest at heart, right? Like the person who saw me, she was a woman of color. And that made me feel even more comfortable right? That here is not just a woman, but a woman of color working with me, hearing my accounts and being able to say, oh, no, you don't have that. You have this, right? And here are things I recommend. Here are tools I recommend to help you get even healthier along your journey.
I know you said the word liberating, right? Liberating in terms of you finally getting that validation of, I'm not crazy. There's actually a reason why I am this.
Like
for
this,
those, what insight would you have? Because I know people where they're like, they self-diagnose themselves because it was TikTok or Instagram popular. Like, oh, I have ADHD. Oh, I have this. So they could probably self-diagnose themselves because they could relate to that. While at the same time, why would you advise or encourage those to look at a formal psychotherapy assessment and to work with a therapist? What does that do? Because I could also understand the fear of, oh, they're probably going to validate that I am crazy. What am I going to do with this?
There is that aspect too, right? If you come up with, if there is some sort of diagnosis that terrifies you, and one of like the CPTSD obviously was not one that I was expecting. I thought it was something else. And I did go through like a full 2-week grieving period of like, oh, this wasn't just something I was born with. This is something I had to actually live through, right? And if you're going to get a therapist, to make sure this therapist had a specialization in whatever is your label or your perceived label, because they're going to be able to help you. They'll understand and come from a place of wanting to give you resources that could benefit you to feel better. Because that's really what it is. It's about us coming to a place of acceptance and feeling better in the skin we're in and the world we're living in. So you can self-diagnose yourself. And I had done that with another label, but there's so much overlap between different labels and different characteristics and symptoms that having the professional, I went through 12 sessions. I went double what she would normally do because she was like, I could diagnose you with this, but there's also this. And by digging deeper, she could say, oh, yep, that's off the table. That's what this is. And so it helps to have a better understanding so you can get more appropriate tools and resources to help you. That being said, it also helps me understand different parts of the population because even if I have this label, right, I can see how the characteristics here also kind of overlap with this bubble. And so it helps me to better understand others and relate to them in a way that even though I may not fully know their experience, I can understand that feeling. I can understand living with certain characteristics. So self-diagnosis is helpful if we're going to be able to use that to move us forward in a productive and healthy direction. But if it's just a label to give an excuse, like, oh, well, that's why I do this, right? But we're not going to help ourselves live better in our world, then why? And also by going the next step to the professional, I think you're giving yourself and those around you, right? My husband better understands me now. My friends better understand me. Other people I connect with better understand me, and I better understand them because it just happens that you say something and someone's like, oh my gosh, me too. And you start chatting and it just opens up this whole other world where then someone else feels understood, safe, heard, seen, and maybe deciding, maybe this is something I want to explore further for myself so I don't feel trapped or stuck in this way of living, right?
We're around the same age. You're the same age as my partner. And I'm just being transparent. I am very jealous that it is now where it's more open to talking about these neurodivergencies compared to when we were younger, like grade school or even high school, where we can even talk about it. And I've been trauma-informed certified. And even through that, I'm being mindful of when clients ask me, for example, hey, how do you do this? I have problems doing time management. And rather than telling them what to do, I ask the question, well, what has worked for you? What is a step you can do? Because it's being mindful that someone's brain, you were saying about how it is better in terms of your relationship with your husband, your relationship with your friends, with family members, And I know so often what people think of that, this is how anxiety happens, right? We think of the what ifs and what the future is going to hold, right? And a lot of things like, okay, they're going to label me with, or they're going to validate that it's ADHD, example.
Right.
So what do I do now? Do I just say, hey, mom, I have ADHD. This explains why I have piles of clothes throughout my room, but they are organized in my head. Like
the chaos files.
Yeah, the chaos files. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of family members and friends who have ADHD. So I'm curious, like, what is the communication with a loved one of like, hey, I had this realization, or not realization, but I was assessed.
Or both. It could be a realization of like, I think this might be me.
Rather than using it as an excuse. Do you know what I mean? Because you want to make sure that the other person doesn't feel like, oh, she's just making an excuse to explain why she's so messy.
Right. And I think you share, hey, I'm starting to notice these things. What else would you say about me that like is kind of quirky? And then having this feedback of a loved one and being willing to take it, for some people that have like rejection dysphoria, that might be like a no-go, like a no zone. We're not even going to ask that question, but it helps because you can both work together on, hey, I want to try doing this to see if it helps me. Or, hey, I actually do need reminders here, or whatever it is. Hey, I could use your help in learning how to organize. Like, what is that even? How did you do that? Right. So it has to be a give and a take, and there has to be vulnerability on both sides of recognizing this is a real thing. One, whether you believe it's purely scientific, purely spiritual, purely whatever, or some hodgepodge. The fact is you both work together to help each other and support yourselves, right? I'm here to help my partner. I'm hoping he's also here to help me. And then when he sees me in a certain state, or if I tell him, hey, today is just not a great brain day for me, then he can ask me, what do you need my help with? How can I support you?
That question. And I don't think that's just a neurodivergent thing. I was having
it's a life thing.
I was on a phone call with a loved one, and they were sharing with me like how they were having conscious conversations with their partner. And she was just like, oh my gosh, I'm having this realizations that I haven't been paying attention and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, this is great. Like, no, that just means I've been a horrible partner. No, like it's actually great. You're aware. So two things. One, be aware, create action. But what people forget, because I don't know why, but I feel like as women, we make shit up in our head in a story.
We kind of do sometimes. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I know we do. And I told my loved one, I was just like, literally just ask him, what does he need?
Yeah.
Like ask someone, what do they need? And take ego out the door. If your partner is going to be telling you, I need time and space, because that's how they cope. And maybe you are different. Maybe you want someone to hold you. You want someone to like listen to you and cry. That is okay. But also be okay that not everybody has similar coping mechanisms as you. That's why the question of what do you need right now is an important question.
How can I be there for you? How can I support you? But the thing is, we have to also be willing to receive the help. And it's not just a neurodivergent thing. This is a person of color thing. This is a, first generation thing, or children of immigrants. Like it is so much piled on top of everything that we have to be willing to receive help. And if we start feeling that feeling to, as my therapist told me, she's like, over communicate. Just over communicate. Like, hey, I need help, but my brain, and I use that. My brain is telling me, not me. My brain is telling me this, and then I'm going to be a burden and this and that. And so by just letting it out there, it's not just your partner. It could be friends and family that do want to support you, because you will come across people who don't believe in it. Or like, oh, that's just esos son tonterías. Like, that's just silly talk you have, right? So it's especially important you recognize who are the people that really are your village, who are the people that really may not understand, but are willing to try to learn and try to grow with you. And that you're going to make mistakes. There are going to be some setbacks, and not berating you or giving you an extra hard time, but recognizing, oh, this is hard. This is really hard for her, and she's probably going to beat herself up more than anything I could ever tell her. So being able to know who you are, which is how I got here, right? All these life experiences, and being able to say, this is who I am for better or worse. And the parts that are worse, I'm not just going to live and dwell in there like, oh, I'll never change. Things never change. Like, no, how can I help myself so that the anxiety piece or depression piece are not so strong, right? Because it is ultimately on us to help ourselves. And if we're not willing to do that, it doesn't matter whether you self-diagnose or go to professional, nothing real or sustainable is going to happen in your life.
So I will be vulnerable because this might help people that might be stuck in the mud, right? And it was after we worked together, because I know we worked together during COVID and the pandemic.
Yes.
And my business doubled. Like, I mean, you knew me before then because you used to go to my in-person events back in the day.
You're awesome.
Yeah. And I think at the time when we were working together, I had about 20 plus clients and I was doing bi-weekly events. And then after doing that for a full year or two, I burnt out where I would just randomly cry. I wasn't triggered by anything, but I'm pretty sure anyone listening or even you, Danielle, I would just start crying. And I knew what I had to do to make money. I knew what I had to do for work. I just couldn't. And I kept complaining. I kept complaining to my boyfriend. I kept complaining to friends and loved ones. And then in my head, I heard all this shit talk. I'm like, I am so tired of listening to this bullshit. I need to go see a therapist again. I just got over myself.
Yeah, you get to a point where I can't live like this. And I say even now in this household, which gets rather busy. I don't.
Danielle locked the door right before this.
I had to lock the door because my mom walked in, being like, "What's going on in there?" But living with my mom, my husband, my 3 kids, and a dog, it can be a lot sometimes. It can be a lot. So
there's a quote that you can do it all the day you realize you should not do it all.
Yeah.
Which means asking for help.
Yeah. And you can do it all. And you'll never be able to do everything 100%. So you can do it all, and no, it's not going to look perfect, and it can get messy, and you may not appease everyone in the process, including yourself, right? You will inadvertently you're going to let down someone at some point. I think it was Shonda Rhimes, her book of Yes, The Year of Yes, or whatever it was, right? Something like that. I started reading it. And I wanted to read about a woman who was this top head, who was really killing it, and also a mom. And I remember her saying that some days she's doing great. She's at school with her daughter, watching the play, doing this, but then something suffers at work. And then the next day, she's doing amazing at work, and she hasn't seen her kid for however long, right? So yeah, you can do it all, but do you really need to? Do you have to? Is there a way to bring in more ease? Is there a way to, the intergenerational trauma piece? Listen to what were the voices you heard and the words you heard and the actions and the silences. What did the silence mean growing up? And is that what you want to recreate in your life? Because you can, but do you have to? Is there a different way that's maybe more beneficial for you and future generations?
I actually love that. And I actually want to remind listeners what you grew up to and saw. Or maybe even what made me realize I wanted to get out of politics. I was seeing all these people that I admired, right? They had amazing clients' accounts, making great money, were in the front page of all the big newspapers. But then I saw their personal life. I'm like, I don't want that. And so seeing what you grew up with, or maybe professionally in your career, I just want to remind our listeners, you get to unlearn and create how you want your life to look like, and acknowledging where you're at in this present moment. Because I understand that we can't control life experiences and situations.
Right. We're not 100% in control, but we can, it depends on the trauma piece too, but we can either choose how we're going to respond versus react, or help ourselves get to a place where we can respond more in alignment with what we want to respond with versus the initial guttural reaction that we're hit with. And that's part of why I left that company. We had sold a business, right? We sold it to a bank, and I got pregnant with my second daughter, and I'd had complications with my first. personally, and she had complications as well. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to do this again. I already have one prototype of what that life is like. I don't want to do that again. And also because you realize your worth and you realize where you're appreciated or not. You realize maybe the environment isn't actually helping you grow, right? Maybe it's not who you are anymore. And I made that big decision.
And that's a lot of grief. It's a lot of grief.
It's
when
a
you
lot of
realize
grief.
That.
And there was that feeling of, I'm going to disappoint all these people because, you know, so my dad's company, there was, you know, his business partners person, his son also working there. There was, I'm going to disappoint all these people by leaving. And my life is for me and for my family. No one else is going to be raising my kids and being there for those moments. And I'd already missed plenty of things with my first. Right. So it was that reparenting piece, you know, each child I said has gotten a different version of me. I think a better version with each step.
I'm getting
but
more
also,
like Danielle, I got these earrings. I'm going to take it out because I'm getting so relaxed as we're going to deep into our conversation. So continue.
But also just realizing, you know, the struggles that come right with parenting more. So I just feel like you have to know who you are and you have to know what you're willing to accept and what you're willing to choose for yourself moving forward. And if you choose to have children or be a part of other children's lives, whether, you know, their nephews, nieces, nibblings. I love that phrase, nibblings.
Wait, I have not heard that term. What does that mean?
It's a way of being able to say nephews and nieces without having to be gender specific.
Oh,
so I like nibblings, kind of like siblings, but nibblings, right?
Thank you. Love it.
I was like, oh, this is so great. But it's just being able to see how you want to do things differently in your life than how you were raised. And it doesn't mean your whole childhood was horrible. Maybe for some people it was, maybe for some people it wasn't, but it's saying, okay, this part is lovely. And for the part that isn't, what can I do? And also, again, what resources do I need? What tools do I need to help myself move forward to live something different?
It's
despite possibly disappointing everyone in the process of you figuring out who your true self is.
And also true self at the moment. I also want to share that too, because true self can evolve and change.
Oh, 1,000%.
Depending on what happens.
We're always evolving. Yeah. Me today is not the same person 10 years ago.
No, because some life situation or experience has happened. You're like, oh, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I think it was, you know, our spiritual mentor, Becky, that said it, but like our kids are our elders, like in another dimension.
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, like I see my nibblings as you were sharing earlier, where I'm like, oh my gosh, that's where I got it from.
Yes.
You know, and then how can I change the situation here? Right? Like, for example, I was with my two nieces, right? They're sisters. And she like yelled at her little sister. And she's like, Tita, which is similar to Tia or Ati.
Yes.
Like, Tita, look, she like marked all over like the coffee table. And then I'm like, okay, I'm so glad you shared that with me, but your sister probably just didn't know that was wrong. You know, like she was in a very reactive state. And I was like, hey, like, we're going to clean this together, okay?
And we're going to get a piece of paper and you can color on this as much as you.
I was like, let's get a napkin. I mean, there were washable markers. Like, we're going to clean it. And I was like, you need to write here, okay? Like, not here on this table because we put our food here, we put coffees there. Like, explaining it to them too.
Yeah, because they do understand it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Children understand so much more than we give them credit for, which in turn speaks to how we were raised and maybe not given credit for understanding a lot more.
Correct.
Than our parents or elders thought we knew. And we did.
Oh my God.
So there is that unlearning there too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I was being gaslit, but not intentionally. It was just, oh, no, you didn't see that. Oh, no, you didn't hear that. Oh, no, you heard wrong. Did I? We realized later, oh, no, I didn't. I heard perfectly clearly and correctly. And, you know, and then it's understanding even the past. Why were things said the way they were?
Yes. And also not blaming our parents, but there's also the, like, to my understanding from how they were also raised, you need to respect the elders, right? So do what they say, right? Like, don't touch that. Like, for example, when I was young, there was hot coffee and my grandma yelled at me and I was 3. She was like, don't touch it. I'm a kid. I'm going to go touch it. What happens? I got 3rd-degree burns. I went to the hospital.
It's funny you bring that up. And also because tonight, and this kind of touches also with how kids or the younger generations really are here to teach us. Very honest. Like I'm generally, I think, a pretty calm parent, but I have my moments.
An amazing
I'm
parent.
human. I am human. I have raised my voice. It has happened. So tonight, my youngest decided it would be fun to stand up on bed and put on her nighttime pull-up and her pants. She's still 2. She's almost 3, but she's not as coordinated. At first, we don't stand up on beds and, and I got scared. Like, oh my gosh, she can fall off this bed because she was very close to the edge. And I raised my voice like, please get down from the bed. That's not safe. And she just looked at me and wouldn't listen, just kept doing her thing. And I was like, if you're unable to keep yourself safe, I'm going to have to take you off this bed. I was going to count to 5. And I had made a threat, which I try not to do, but it was, okay, well then you're going to have to, sleep in your bed all night. And, but it was coming out of fear, which is very much from my predecessors. Right. And I felt yucky about it afterwards. And she went straight to my husband. Mommy yelled at me. She made me sad and she told me this. And I heard it and she came back to me. She said, I didn't like you yelled at me. And we had this conversation. So, you know what? You're right. That was inappropriate of me. I did it because I was scared of you falling down, but that's still not okay. I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do better. Do you forgive me? She said, yes. And I was like, can I have a hug? She just beamed. And she said it a few more times as I was putting her to bed. I really didn't like that. And again, it goes to show where they're talking to us. So we make mistakes, but we have to own up to it and then create repair, right? And create repair. So that's that reparenting and being willing to swallow our pride and ego and be like, yeah, I screwed up. And I told her, you're right. I shouldn't have said you have to spend all night in your bed because the kids know if they wake up in the middle of the night, they're welcome to come join us, whether they're scared or not. Like we don't want them to have excuses. If they want to just snuggle, come snuggle. You don't need to make an excuse for what your needs are in that moment. Right. And so that was tonight, putting her to bed and having to own up so that I made a mistake and I'm not going to do that because it's not right. And I don't want you to think that.
I'm thinking of so much alliterations to our podcast episode where I'm like, I need to rename it to even talking about multi-generational caregiving because in all vulnerability, for example, you're in real estate, but my parents own a property and they rented it out to a friend of a friend. And they want to back out of the 1-year lease, right? And they were giving the sob story. And I'm like, Mom, this is a business transaction, right? And I was like, we're going to get a lawyer involved. She's like, wait, why? How much do they cost? I'm like, Mom, this is a business transaction. I was like, she's been giving you too much sob stories. You're not this. No. And so I was like, I acknowledge I raised my voice and it was like, you should have known, you should have done this. I shared this with you that you were supposed to do it, but you still didn't listen to me and you did it this way. Now I have to repair it. I'm having to deal with talking to a lawyer, explaining everything for 2 days because I knew my parents were going to explain it to me, to the lawyer. And as I was yelling, and then my mom was like, well, I didn't know, Elaine, and then it just also made me have a better understanding of, that because I'm a first-gen immigrant, I am born and raised here. For immigrants,
we have a different
it was
perception, I think.
Yeah. They had to assimilate and integrate, right? And maybe too scared to speak up. And I told my mom, hey, I'm sorry I yelled at you. I actually have a better understanding of what you had to go through as an immigrant. I'm not going to lie, though. In my head, I was just like, if this is the other way around, my parents would no way. They still do not apologize when they make mistakes.
It's so different. So different.
Yeah, but I will because I'm just trying to be a better human. I acknowledge that I'm not a know-it-all.
And I think to your point, right, my mom lives with us. And so I remembered saying, I'm so grateful because, I love my mom. growing up, she was my best friend, but now I see how there were certain aspects of the relationship that maybe were not ideal or maybe could have been different. But again, everything happens. I'm here. I'm doing great now, so it's fine. But I remember saying I was so grateful to have her live with us so that she could experience unconditional love. And all the things that I started to notice why, right? Like, why do we do things the way we do? Why do we say certain things? Why do we act? Why do we think a certain way? It was being able to be like, okay, you didn't get that. And maybe I didn't get that, but now I know that it can be something different and I want to give that to you. And so it's been interesting to see even on her end, there are certain layers that I've seen shift and change because we speak differently to one another or to the kids, or we do things differently, that they can grow. I'm not saying to like put hope in all adults of prior generations, but through our example, we do get to show them something different. And we may get that apology. We may get a different way of communicating with one another. So yeah, it's really beautiful being able to be in that space of you acknowledging and sharing. Whether it's reciprocated or not isn't the point. It's just you being a better person.
Legacy leader. I know what you're thinking. Elaine, you have such good stuff here. I want more. So if you want more tips and advice for your business, career, and life, sign up for my Gifts and Gifts newsletter at elainelu.com/join. That's JOIN. And here's 3 things you'll get when you join, because I'm like Santa Claus. I love giving. Number 1, funny gifts, because who doesn't love memes and pop culture references? This newsletter is so fetch. Number 2, receive actionable gifts. That's business, career, and life tips that you can start doing today. Third, the gift of me. Not only do you get my wins, but also my failures, my reflections. My Gifts and Gifts newsletter is like an up-to-date diary. Think Zanga or Life Journal for my fellow millennials, where I share vulnerable stories, relatable mistakes, and important life tips like what to watch on Netflix, like when's the next Bridgerton season. So if you're ready for those fun gifts and actionable gifts to create a more sustainable life, then join my newsletter at elainelu.com/join. That's JOIN. All right, let's get back to the episode. Sharing without expectations, right? Because then when you're attached to an expectation, then disappointment happens, resentment happens. So my next question, and I kind of warned you before we hit record, is more of a selfish question. And we're kind of alluding to it in this conversation.
Yeah.
Being a woman of color, being first-gen immigrant, often women of color, or just women in general, we are,
women in general.
no one tells us about this silent role of being a caregiver because who do our kids go to? Like, they're crying, they're going to go to their mother.
Yeah.
Who do our parents go to when they need support? Like what I was sharing about my parents, whether it's legal or financial or emotional, or even taking them to the doctor. It's the daughters. It's the woman.
Usually the daughter.
Yeah. So can you share advice or tips on how to handle it, or even how to even create boundaries? Because, I don't get it even perfectly. Even I was getting text messages from the lawyer from talking to my parents and during dinner, and my boyfriend's like, "You're doing a lot." I'm like, but I'm choosing to.
Our role,
But I'm choosing
that we've been raised into. But there is a choice. And I think, again, I'm not perfect and I've made my fair share of mistakes, but boundaries are key. And, especially when you have someone who's older and has their own aging related stuff going on, whether it's, mental, emotional, whatever, dementia, Alzheimer's, all that. It is being able to say, I can't do that right now. I will do it. Right. And recognizing for yourself that this is not the same person you had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever it was. There's a lot of grace involved in forgiveness of yourself, right? With people who's you're cool because you're tired, you're overwhelmed, whatever. But also for them that they're going through a lot. And this is not just a change in your role, but a change in their role because they have to get help now. Right. And for those that have been helping their parents since childhood, right? Especially if your parents spoke at, their own native language, their own native tongue, it's giving yourself the ability to take a moment and say, I don't have to do this right now. Or like you said, I get to do this right now. Taking space when you need to, being able to say, even if it's, again, with those with memory care issues, 5 times, 10 times answering, 20 times the same question, walking out the room if you have to, right? I gotta ground myself and center myself and take some deep breath. But you have to do what's right for you to ground and balance so that you can be the best version of yourself for yourself and for this person that you're caring for. Because especially at, as they're older, there's no need to make all of our lives more difficult based on how we're treating other people.
Mm-hmm.
It could be frustrating for sure. And it's also, again, trying to remind yourself that this is a different person and you're a different person. So if you tended to react a certain way as a child when a parent acted towards you or said things towards you, that you don't have to be that version of yourself. What? Having your village, friends, family, therapists, whatever that looks like, having your village to help you with whatever you're feeling and going on. I shared with you how I'd spent part of this weekend helping a friend moving out of when she used to live in her mom's apartment 20 plus years ago, because her mom's moving in with her and her family, right? And so it means asking for help. It's not just, like I was telling you, it's not just, oh, let's go to brunch. Oh, let's do happy hour. Oh, let's get a mani-pedi. Oh, let's get a massage or a facial together. It's, hey, I need you to help me move out of this place, or help me pack. I need to help me unpack. Hey, I'm struggling here because I have a child, sandwich generation, and an elder. Can you help watch my child? Can you, whatever it looks like, but being able to recognize your limits and not wait till you're at your limit to the best of your ability to then ask for help. Because then you're at your limit and you may not get help. And then you feel even worse.
Well, I want to share even the siblings part of it, right? So like I have 2 brothers, and like I said, I am the female, and there's that silent role. And like I said, I have agency and choice. I've decided to take it. At the same time, also honoring what my brothers are willing to put into it, right? And for one of my brothers, he has 2 kids, so completely understand that. The other one, single, is in sales and travel, except he's the baby. He's the youngest. So he's very short with my parents, gets annoyed really easily when there's a mistake that happens. And I was like, look, I know you do not want to talk to mom and dad, but I need your emotional support to talk things through. Like even in this situation this past week, I'm like, hey, I remember I referred you to a lawyer. It worked out well with you. Like, would you refer them to even mom and dad? Yeah. Okay. So what are the steps? And then even sharing him my thoughts or ideas of what my parents should do next. And then I would talk to him. I'm like, okay, I talked to, Daryl, my other brother. It's like, oh, you talked to him? How come he doesn't talk to me? Like, mom, you already know he's going to be so annoyed talking to you. Just know he cares and loves you. We're not going to go there. Yeah, he cares and loves you. So he's supporting you by talking with me.
The best way he knows how.
So just even respecting what other people are willing to do.
I love that you have siblings, because that does help a lot. Generally, right, to be able to dole out. But again, it goes back to speaking up for yourself and the boundaries and really asserting yourself. Like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I can't do. And I need you to help me here, because there's so many dynamics where it is left on one person and the rest are like, oh, I don't want to do it. And they don't. And the other person vents and kvetches, but they don't actually speak up for themselves and say, nope, sorry, I'm not doing this. Or, hey, you need to chip in the money then. If you're not going to be here in this capacity, I need you in this capacity. And I do have a half sister. We have the same dad, but different moms, and different than having a full sibling. But it is helpful to have someone that you can talk to and, hey, I need your advice. Hey, I'm going through this. So if you have that, that's great, right? If you don't, then it's finding that network. And if you don't have that in friends or family, you have to find it. Like, that's the thing, is this is the action. I remember you said that earlier, but taking action, and you have to, because you'll drown otherwise. There's no way of mincing it. You will drown otherwise.
Being brave enough to ask. Actually, what I even took away from this, because my dad is preparing for knee surgery. See, we are talking about real life situations.
Like real.
So he's doing a knee replacement. It actually works out well because my boyfriend's going to be out of town. So I will be there the first 10 days of his surgery. And I'm also going to be there for pre-op. but there is a day after where he's going to do an appointment. So you actually really gave me great advice. I'm like, shit, I can't take him. What am I going to do? But I love the language that you just shared. Like, hey, I'm going to be 10 days with dad. I'm going to be there pre-op. Can someone please bring him post-op? I have to be at a conference.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's really honoring where you're at and what you can and can't do, and not trying to be everything for everyone, because you will suffer, and it also shows, hey, I trust you. You are fully capable sibling, cousin, whatever, to help me in this capacity. I trust in your ability to take dad home from the hospital and do something when I can't, or whatever it is. Yeah, I think the other thing too is I'm grateful that I have a pretty good relationship with my mom. And I think it can get complicated for those that don't have that. And so in that respect, for advice there, it would be, don't force yourself to do something just because you think you should or you have to, so it does get tricky depending on what that dynamic is. But again, therapy has helped.
Yes.
Highly. And again, if you don't have that, it's talking to a friend, it's going on one of those internet forum chat groups, whatever, that you can talk to along that same theme or whatever is going on in your life. Because some friends don't have that. They're not dealing with sandwich generation. Or they're not dealing with a parent because maybe their parents have already passed, right? So just being able to find what you need to help you get through it is a big part of it.
Yeah. Oh, we have dived deep in conversation. I was like taking
deep,
notes.
That's life. That's life.
Right? Like motherhood, multi-passion entrepreneurship with these 9-figure empires, mental health, marriage, multi-generational caregiving. So a more lighthearted question that's next is, how did you delve into wanting to be an intuitive, a medium, a spiritual mentor?
I didn't. I was terrified, especially the mediumship. But I remember things in my childhood and always feeling certain things and intuiting certain things and hearing again stories of other relatives in my family and what they could do. And it was yoga training. I did a yoga teacher training, and that was the gateway. And then in that training met Becky, who did Reiki. And I remember her business card had a line from a Frou Frou song, and it caught my attention. And I was like, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you do. I don't still understand what this Reiki business is, but I know I need to meet with you. And so experiencing it with her made me feel like, oh, this feels right. And then she started telling me, well, you do this, this, this. And I had other people I could rather get a random psychic reading or whatever. And they'd say the same thing. Well, you do what I do. I was like, oh yeah, okay. But
I'm laughing. Sorry. I'm laughing because I remember I was telling him, like, my grandma just had a stroke. Like, what do I do? Like, talk to Becky. I'm like, okay. And then I talked to Becky and she's like, I need to communicate with my grandma. How do you do it? She's like, Reiki. I'm like, I don't want to do it. And she's like, why? I'm like, because it's such a trendy thing and I don't want to do something that's trendy. I just really want to communicate with my grandma. She's like, no, you need Reiki. I'm like, okay, but I don't want to call myself like a Reiki master and like have to do all this trendy shit. Like, I'm just being really honest and transparent.
Yeah, because it took off. It went in a certain direction and there was a whole aesthetic behind it.
Yeah, I didn't.
Which I kind of fell prey to, but I was like, but this isn't quite me,
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to meet the branding that was perceived.
Yes. Yeah. No, it is the opening. That was the opening in her saying, well, I also teach this other stuff to really help you heighten your intuition. Mm-hmm. And so then through that, I was like, oh, okay. And then it was, I was so scared of the mediumship. He was like, you've got to do it. And it's true. So now I tend to lean into the things that terrify me to a certain extent, not safety wise, right? So I'm, not going to be foolish because there's something there I'm meant to learn. There's something there for me to overcome. And it was in that seeing how I navigated the initial mediumship sessions that, there were a lot, you're trying to put the trigger warning. There were a lot of unalives, like intentional unalive. And those were my greatest fears. I had
what does that mean, just in case other people who are
suicide.
listening
Suicide. And I'd had someone in the house I grew up with commit suicide. not when I was living there, before I'd lived there. And I could feel the energy because it was in my room and my closet. And
sorry, my
suddenly,
mouth is open because I went through a similar experience where I was living somewhere and they didn't tell me when I was renting it, but someone committed suicide in the room I was sleeping in.
Yeah, it was intense. And that's part of why it scared me, right? But then as I started to experience this practicing, and that was pretty consistently a lot of the situations that came through and navigating it, I realized, you know what? I can handle this. I can handle this. And I had a deeper understanding of why people do that. And so it just kind of anchored me even further in the spirituality piece and wanting to understand also the neuroscience piece, like wanting to understand what's going on in our brains and how is this part of our brain? Is it genetic? Is it epigenetic? Is it like circumstance? Like, did you get into a car accident that damaged your prefrontal cortex? And like, there are all these different parts to it that just kind of took me down this path of weaving the spirituality, but also how do we move past where we're at, right? But it's kind of like practical spirituality, like getting to know ourselves more deeply, our faith, our connection to our spirit and whatever it is we believe in, if we believe in something more, and how we relate to others in that space.
Well, it's like when I talk about P&L reports with my clients or looking at their numbers, right? Sorry.
The data, all the data.
Well, even before the data, right? Like we're just like intuitively, it's like, okay, I know that majority of my revenue stream is coming from this.
Yes.
I think I'm getting an ROI from this marketing channel. I don't think this is working. So it's like think, right? Intuitive. This is what I'm thinking. And your intuition's always right. What data, right? The masculine energy, the opposite of feminine spirituality. What it does is that it actually validates and confirms the intuition that you have so that you have inner confidence. So it's that what you were talking about, the neuroscience, cognitive, as well as spirituality, so that you then have the confidence and the validation to take action.
Yes. And I love that you said that because I've met so many people who are like, well, how do I know if I'm right? How do I, and in getting to practice with your intuition and confirming, you then get to see sometimes you have this weird feeling, but it wasn't really your intuition. It was a fear, a trigger, an unhealed wound that was coming up. And some people follow that. And then they're like, but that didn't work out for me. Like, oh, well then tap into that. What really was going on? Let's go on a deeper level because intuitively it could be you knew something wasn't right, but you were so married to the story, so married to the idea that you went down a different path that from the data supports, oh yeah, I shouldn't have done that. I just really wanted it to work, right? And that can be business, relationships. It can be a lot of areas.
It could intertwine in different aspects of your life. And what's really fascinating is that the same lesson continues to happen, whether it's a different phase, a different situation, until you finally get it.
Yeah, because you stop the pattern at that point. You realize what's happening.
A disruption.
Yeah, and you make a choice to do different. And, it's beautiful. It's beautiful when you get to witness that because it could be just as simple as saying no. If you have a pattern of always saying yes, 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 okay, people pleasing or whatever, and then being able to be like, oh, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. And then not explaining yourself, right? Because it could be in ways like you said no, but you kept explaining yourself. Maybe you over-explained. Maybe you gave an excuse that wasn't the real reason until you get to that point of just being like, I'm sorry, I can't. And that's it. And all of a sudden things kind of free up for you. It's beautiful. It's painful. But it's also really beautiful to know that we don't have to live in that space of suffering. Yeah. And whether we have neurological differences that can sometimes impede our way forward, right? Again, given the space and the society we live in, whether we have that or not, we still have the ability to say, I'm going to choose different. I'm going to choose to make a better life. And that can be hard from a very depressed state. It can be hard from an anxious space, right? But you choose your heart. I can't remember who said that. Someone's like, choose your heart.
Choose your heart.
And I have to Google it. But there was someone, and I remembered, I don't know if it was on social media or an article or a book, but choose your heart. And that impacted me because, if we expect everything to be easy, we may never fully grow to what we're capable of growing into. And so these challenges, and again, life, even the areas that had trauma, brought me here. And I can't want to take that away, because if I hadn't gone through all that, I don't know if I'd still be in this space. I don't know if I would be doing what I'm doing. I don't know if I'd be able to relate and connect to so many people of such different backgrounds. I wasn't born, but there's a beauty to it.
Yeah.
That was the first, that was the quote, by the way, with Becky. She had, "There's beauty in the breakdown." And that was one of my favorite songs. And when I saw that, again, it's just, whether you call it, signs from the universe, whatever you want to call it, it just felt like there's something here. I can't ignore this. And it led me here. So I'm glad I looked at her card and I took her seriously and took that feeling inside seriously. Like, you just got to see her. You don't know why, but you have to do it.
Yeah. And I remember that's what you told me. And that's when I saw her. And I just even think of different situations where there's like a fuck yes moment, like I'm going to do it. I know when it's there's two emotions that come through me, or intuitive feelings like fuck yes, I need to do it. Or the second is there is fear in it, but I know it would be good for me. Yeah. Like going back and doing EMDR therapy, for example. It wasn't like, fuck yes, I need to do it, but it was, I need to do it, but I don't know. I don't know if I want to go dig deep through my trauma and triggers and feel all that shit again.
And I haven't even done that yet. So that's something too, going back a few questions, why having a professional work with you is so helpful is I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do EMDR now that I know I have this. Okay, let's do this. And I remember her telling me, Danielle's going to take you a while, and I don't recommend doing EMDR first. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah. She talked about the science and everything, right? Like, there's some things are inconclusive, but she said, you have to work on somatic first, because it's still in my nervous system. It's still in my body. And it was mind blowing, because I could have potentially done a treatment, resource that I thought was going to be helpful. That could have potentially set me back a bit, because my body wasn't yet ready yet to receive, right? Or to be in that space of, the rapid eye movement and bringing stuff up and kind of going through it all over again. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the thing, a professional can tell you based on the science, hey, this tends to work really well with people in this space. Or yes, that's right, you should try that. Or you know what? After 6 months of somatic work, see how you're feeling, try it out, right? That way we're not putting ourselves in a situation of trying to rush the healing process or rush something that we're not really yet capable or ready to receive.
I want to validate that for you, because the first time I went through a lot of therapists. I am a therapist slut, because this girl needs a lot of work. Not you, me. But
oh, I need help too. It's okay. It's all right.
I think it was 2014. Yeah, 2014. I was fired 2 times. I was working in Montana. I was working with a therapist there, and she was
fired from the job or fired from the therapist?
I was fired. No. I'm not a therapist, but fired from 2 jobs. And then I was living in Montana working on a campaign. And I was working with a therapist because I just was just at my lowest point after being fired twice. And then when you're working political campaigns, you're living in different states and you don't know anyone.
Feels a little unstable in that sense that you never know what's happening next.
Correct. Because campaigns ends in 3-6 months, a year. It's basically like a project until it's election day. But anyways, I was with my therapist. I was sharing everything that's going on. And she was like, okay, let's try EMDR. And we tried it for 15 minutes. And she's like, oh, okay, you're not ready. And my Asian dude was like, what are you saying? I'm not ready. What do I need to do to be ready? She's like, no, you're not ready. And you know what? I actually appreciated that. It wasn't like, okay, how are you going to go from amateur to pro athlete, right? It's just, you're not ready. So I appreciated that. And then I remember about 2 years later, then I moved back to California, and I still had an ongoing, not like a consistent therapy patient relationship, but just a continuous one, like when I needed her every couple months. And then I told her, hey, I'm feeling something in my chest when this happened. And then she was like, you're ready. I'm like, ready for what? I completely forgot about it. I was like, what are you talking about? I was just so used to talk therapy. She's like, no, you're ready to do EMDR. I'm like, what? She's like, but you can't do it with me because I'm not licensed in California. So go find someone. So even to your point, what you said earlier is I found a therapist who was a woman of color. And that made all the difference because I worked with other therapists, and not that they weren't great, they were wonderful, but I don't have to explain certain things in terms of like cultural expectations, right?
There's already like an understanding that you kind of, it's like going past a couple sessions, right? You don't have to explain the background or the basics.
No. And plus I'm paying a therapist for full hours. So let's try to save the time and go deep into the shit to heal.
I will say my therapist is amazing, and she's a white woman. And I'm always so grateful for her because I'm half white, half Hispanic, right? And the Hispanic side has some indigenous roots. And so there is, even though it's not the exact makeup of myself, there is this person who is trauma informed, right? Has experience with all these cultures. So it is, finding what's your right fit. Like, what do you need?
It's like dating.
It is.
So when I meet people and they're like, I already tried therapy, didn't work. I'm like, you just didn't meet the right person.
You didn't meet the right one. And
it's like saying, I'm never going to find someone. Well, you just haven't met the right person yet.
That's true. I mean, I went through a couple. And I think of the person I had when I was in my 20s that I wasn't ready for.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like, and I also think about the person I was before. I was like,
I was complaining about like boy issues, and that it was very surface level because I wasn't ready yet to go deeper. Yeah, so I remember that. It's different as you evolve and who you want to see as a therapist, right?
And
like now I have someone who calls me out.
Mm-hmm.
She calls me out, but it's so helpful to be able to understand myself better and also how to relate differently, especially if you have a very traumatized background, whether it's PTSD, CPTSD, or whatever it is, or even just being a child of an immigrant and hearing stories, right? And seeing what they do to help get themselves ahead, being able to talk about that and help unlearn or see what are the things I can take from this that are great. One of the things that might be crippling you or might be, really holding you back from something you really want to do. Just amazing to have that extra person to bounce ideas off of.
So for our listeners who haven't found the one, I'm talking about therapy, you could go to psychologytoday.com.
Yeah.
And then there are filters to look in specific states, or maybe you have a specific challenges or issues that you want to work with. Like maybe you have ADHD.
Yes.
Maybe you are going through gender identity stuff.
Absolutely.
Maybe you want to work with someone specifically within your religion or ethnicity. You could mark those to find the right fit. And here's the thing. I want you to date as many therapists. They do a free complimentary call until you find the one, and you will know. How I usually know is something happens and I just cry. Like they get something out of my soul and I just feel it.
And especially if we've been taught, like I was taught not to cry. And, it's interesting, like you said, being in therapy and you start over your eye, like, I'm sorry. And it's like, you don't have to apologize. But again, it's that part of that, I call it my programming, right? What was my initial programming? But finding that person that gets you to open up or gets you to have that aha moment. Yeah. And you mentioned Becky. So I have my therapist and I have my mentor, my spiritual mentor.
And
they both have their place. And I love them both. Like I could not imagine my life without either one. Because there's something about the spirituality that not every therapist gets, right? Not every therapist.
There is.
Yeah. That having someone, I'm blessed. My therapist is actually very spiritual. So it works wonderfully for me. I don't have to hide any part of who I am with her. But if you don't have that, having that extra person to talk to you deeply about spiritual nature and just what's going on, it offers you hope. It offers you like positivity and like a way out that you're going to get through this.
Well, I know we are talking late at night. It is 10:22 p.m., neighbor.
It's just a tad bit,
But I loved this late night conversation. Sure. We delved deep into everything from motherhood, mental health, marriage, multi-generational caregiving. I am sure our listeners are in love with you. So
it's very kind. Thank you.
Everybody, I just want you to see how she received that compliment.
I appreciate that. Yep.
Yeah.
But it's taken work, right? It takes work, but to be able to yeah, thank you. Take care. I'll receive it.
So 2 things. One is, what is a takeaway that you would like our listeners to take from this episode. That's one. And second, if people want to connect with you, work with you, how can they do that?
So the first thing, which is the takeaway, I would say, is allow yourself to be willing to grow and expand wherever you're at in your journey of life, whether you're single, married, partner, divorced, widowed, whatever age range. Allow yourself to be able to meet yourself where you're at and keep going forward and find that village. Find that village to help you in that journey. Because if not, it can be suffering, and it can be cumbersome and overwhelming, and no one has to go through life alone. We can have moments of loneliness. That doesn't mean we're alone, and we should. I hope that would be a takeaway. As far as connecting with me, and you know this, I don't
connecting with you and working with you. Those two.
So I do have my website, which is divineradiantliving.com. That just gives an insight of who I am and what I do. I would say Instagram, also divineradiantliving.com or at Divine Radiant Living. I've kind of tempered myself. I'm not on social media all the time. I will post mainly stories and occasionally a post, but it gives you, again, an idea of who I am. You can message me through there. You can email me, Danielle at divineradiantliving.com. Yeah. And that's really it. So the piece about social media, I used to I got to post, I got to do this. And then I got to a point of, I live my life. I'm being present with my family and the businesses, I have the real estate. I manage, I'm a fiduciary for someone as well. I help them with their funds. So that takes time, and I'm not going to spend 40 hours on social media. I'm going to post when I feel it's aligned, share when I feel it's aligned, and then spend the rest of my time living.
Yeah. So I hope all of you connect with Danielle. I will put all our contact information in the show notes. And then Danielle, I had the wonderful opportunity where you were a client of mine. So for those listeners who are probably in the fence, interested in working with me, what do you want to share with your experience and any results?
I love, because I got to see you like pre-pandemic and in pandemic and now post-pandemic. And I love having seen your journey and your evolution, because it's not just you as a person, but it's even you professionally. And to know that when someone works with you, you're willing to learn more. You're willing to not just be the person in that room on that day, but a year from now, you're going to be a person who's grown from everyone else you've worked with. And they need to be willing to put in the work with you. That this is something you have to be really willing to do it, to listen, to receive the suggestions, take action. And if something doesn't feel aligned, then come back to the space with you and be like, I didn't feel right. Let's work through this. What else? What else is there? Because it was a very profound growth experience for me getting to work with you, both in the group, in person, and then in the group setting.
Yeah. And now we are neighbors.
Now we are neighbors. Yeah.
It's
and just see where you're still, I think I grew from having worked with you too. I was like, oh yeah, you know what? I don't want to do that. Right? Like that's not the path I want to go down.
Social media, you don't want to be on it all the time. I love doing this podcast, for example. I get to talk and I don't feel on. The only energy I feel like I need to maintain and manage is either myself, it's a solo episode, or a guest speaker. And then it goes out into the ethos of people listening to it. But I am not attached to the number of downloads, because guess what? Not everybody sees the numbers. It's just me and my team, and it doesn't matter.
And the people who are going to listen to you are the people who are going to work with you or may work with you, right? Like, I don't know, they're on the fence. Yeah, they have to be ready to be in that space, to want to work with you and really do the work. It can't just be it's like you have to have that. This is a commitment. And by doing it, great things will happen. And if you're not ready for those great things to happen, if you're not ready to grow through some mistakes you might make in the process, and it's not going to work.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because so often people think I'm going to hire someone, not just a coach, but a therapist. They're going to fix me. They're going to tell me what to do. But you have to be willing to do the work, and not necessarily work in terms of action.
Yeah, but even inside.
Yes,
your mindset,
the reflection, the awareness, like, sure, let's say I give you advice to do posts on social media every day, and you having the awareness of, not that this happened. I'm just giving an example.
Oh yeah, no, I understand.
Elaine, I don't want to post every day. I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm so glad you don't want to do it. Mark that off as a no. Danielle, I am very mindful that you have a mother, 3 kids, a husband. More importantly, you are a human. And this is probably your me time as we're recording this at almost 10:30 p.m.
This is great. This fuels me, by the way. I love this. This is like my jam.
Honestly, I feel like, because we had coffee, I think a month ago, this felt like a continuation of our coffee chat.
So good.
So if our listeners loved this and you want Danielle back on, like, let me know what we should talk about next time.
I mean, we're neighbors. We could be in the same room.
We could do this. Yeah, we could do it in the same room, correct?
We could have a little coffee talk and we could do this.
We could do some
Although I don't drink, I try not to
terribles.
drink too much coffee anymore now. It's green tea for me.
Oh, I just made some loose leaf tea. I could bring it over. I'm secretly inviting myself in because I love her office.
Perfectly fine. But this is really wonderful. Thank you.
What a wonderful episode. Honestly, I was learning so much with Danielle, how to communicate with my nieces, nephews, future kids when I act out, because we're human, we're going to make mistakes. And I learned how to communicate with my own siblings when it comes to the care of my parents, and how to simply ask a loved one who might be going through something in life, hey, what do you need from me? And taking ego out the door when what they need is probably way different from what we need when we get triggered or we're going through something in life. Remember, you can do it all once you realize you should not be doing it alone. So, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, here are 4 things you can do if you feel called to do them. 1, if you can leave a 5-star rating and review, that would mean a lot to me and my team. We create this podcast for accessible education for women of color and allies. Each episode takes about 4 hours to create. It takes me 1 hour to prep and another 30 minutes to 1 hour to record. Then my team spends another 2 hours to edit and market. And number 2, because I care about accessible education, share this with a friend who might be having a hard time caregiving in all the generations, whether it's their kids, their aging parents, or just doing it all. 3rd, don't forget to hit that follow button. When you hit the follow button, it lets the podcast platform know how important this podcast is to women of color and allies like you. And number 4, if you would like to create a more sustainable business or career so you can be more present with your aging parents, kids, partner, or present with yourself, and you want to work with me and my team, then schedule an introductory legacy business and career audit call with me. I only work with 24 clients at one time to ensure each client receives the results they deserve. And you can schedule a complimentary legacy business and career audit call with me at elainelou.com/call. That's ELAINELOU.com/call.